Hi there. Welcome to Bourbon Turntable. This is the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. Tonight, we've got a really fun show. We've got Jim Hough from Liberty Pole Spirits. Jim, welcome to Bourbon Turntable. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kevin.
Yeah, we've got a lot of fun things we're going to get into with Jim. We're going to talk some of his histories, talk about Liberty Pole. I've got a couple of their product, a couple of their whiskeys that we'll try together, and we'll talk a little music somewhere along the way too. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who produce content for the whiskey enthusiast. Distiller's Talk is a show with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. Distiller's Talk, they will talk with distillers. Thus the name. They'll find people from around the country, around the globe, and they'll get into anything and everything distillation. Alan also has a show called One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. If you're a distiller, maybe you're a home distiller, maybe you're a professional distiller, but you've still got a question, you can pose that to Alan and he'll post a response to that question. Alan has a third show called If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. On this show, he breaks away from the whiskey world and gets into the supernatural, the spiritual, a little bit of everything. It's a very interesting show, has some fascinating guests. Be sure to check that out. My Whiskey Den with Pat and Mike and Mitch comes on every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central. My Whiskey Den is where craft whiskey is king. Be sure to check them out. They have some wonderful guests, some fun tastings, and it's always a good time to hang out with the folks in the chat. And next is David Levine with Whiskey in My Wedding Ring. David is a really smart guy, great reviewer. He has a blog where he posts his reviews. He has a podcast where he will interview distillers. So be sure to check that out. And as for our show, if you're watching us on YouTube right now, take just a second and hit subscribe. We would love to have you joining us every week. If you just want to listen, you can do that too. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform as long as it's Apple, Spotify, or Google. Well, Jim, really excited to have you here. I had heard a little bit about your distillery, Liberty Pole, through Alan Bishop and through Chris Koenig, and was at a bar here that has a pretty substantial collection, and they had Liberty Pole Peated Rye on there, so I had to try that. And I recently ordered a bottle of the full proof Monongahela Rye, and that's fantastic. And then you shared with me a bottle of peated bourbon that we'll try a little while, and we'll talk about that too. So my appreciation and fascination with what you're doing at Liberty Pole is just growing. But before we talk whiskey, let's talk about you. You had a full career before you ever got into distilling. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I I had a 30 plus year career in the investment management world. Um, the last 5 or so years of that were what, kind of prompted me to want to do something else. I was at that point where, I'd been a hobby distiller for, you know, quite a few years. I had a little 10 gallon still that, my sons and I used to play around with. I have two sons who were both kind of really science kids,
Hmm.
and it used to just freak my wife out that I would be running the still and cooking grains with my middle-aged or my middle school age sons, but they were they we weren't drinking it, but they were really intrigued at the
Sure.
science of fermentation and distillation. And as I kind of saw her retirement on the horizon,
Hmm.
I just knew that I didn't want to spend the next 8 to 10 years doing what I was doing. I wasn't sure I would even survive to retirement age, in the stress of that job. So, I had gotten pretty good at distilling at that point. This was back in 2012. The
Hmm.
the craft distilling industry was really just starting to get started. I could see kind of a nice growth potential for craft distilling, and put a business plan together and convince my wife that it would be kind of a fun venture.
Hmm.
We're a family of engineers. My wife's an engineer. Both my sons ended up going to school for mechanical engineering, and it just seemed to really fit our, kind of our family.
Yeah.
We had that distilling background, we had the engineering and science, backgrounds. Put a business plan together, and you know, we opened our doors on July 9th of 2016,
Hmm.
and so we just celebrated our eighth birthday.
Well,
So
congratulations. That's great. That's
thank
a
you,
great accomplishment.
thank
Um,
you.
so, how did your background in finance and the things that you were doing there, how was that a benefit to you as you started the distillery, or was your knowledge of investments and the risk factors there, was it something that kind of gave you second thoughts?
I always tell people that naivete is the engine that drives entrepreneurship. Um,
Yes.
if you truly understood and were aware of all the obstacles and things you were going to run into, nobody would open up a business. And so
Mhm.
so it's good to be naive. Now, my finance background kind of prepared me to do the business plan.
Mhm.
I was able to put together a pretty comprehensive business plan. I think my background carried a little bit of weight with banks when we talked
Mhm.
to them about securing a small business loan. They knew that I understood the risks and what we were trying to do, and so I think that was really crucial at the beginning,
Right.
to kind of get funding and get this project moving.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, when we started this, Kevin, this was going to be purely a retirement kind of hobby for my wife and I.
Sure.
My sons were at that point graduated from Pitt. They were on their own careers, and I give them credit that they realized way before I ever did that the cubicle life wasn't for them.
Mhm.
Working for corporate America. So shortly after we had opened the doors, literally a month or so after, they invited us to dinner. They sat us down and said, "Hey, we want to quit our jobs and come to work at the distillery." And
Mhm.
we were just, my wife and I were just both like, "No, you can't do that. We just put you through school. You have great jobs, and most importantly, we can't pay you. We just can't pay you. We're not making any money yet." But they persisted. We still think they were afraid we were going to blow whatever meager inheritance we might have been able to give them. They wanted to protect their self-interest, but they came on board. They worked for quite a few months
Mhm.
without a paycheck, and thank God they did, because with their background in engineering, they've been able to kind of really take over the production process, and handle the equipment breakdowns, and work with vendors, and it's just been a great family business for 8 years. We spend an incredible amount of time together,
Mhm.
and we are all still close, and we still have Sunday night dinners. So
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
that's
been a
great.
bonding experience.
Do you know the, licorices down at Iron Root?
I know of them.
Yeah.
When we were on Allen's Distillers Talk.
Mhm.
And Alan, if you're listening to this, I'm still waiting for you to put together the distiller family feud. Um, we did talk about all the, kind of all the
Right.
family. More specifically, there's a lot of brothers,
Mhm.
in the distilling industry. So,
Yeah.
so my son Rob and Kevin, are there. But yeah, there are lots of families, and
Yeah.
I'd still like Alan to put together some sort of a distiller family feud. That would be fun.
I'll see Alan in a couple of days. I'll ask him about that. But yeah, their story is a very family oriented story as well. So
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you don't know them, we need to definitely get you introduced, because
I've
it's
never met them, but know of them.
yeah,
Pretty. Yeah,
yeah. We can make that connection because I think that would be fun for you guys to trade stories.
yeah.
Um, so in terms of whiskey, what got you into whiskey and kind of led you down the path to even start with that 10-gallon still?
So I always was a whiskey guy.
Hmm.
I'm a Irish Catholic, and my house always had Jameson
Hmm.
at the ready, and so big Irish whiskey fan, and when I really wanted to learn how to distill, it was kind of a no brainer that I wanted to learn how to make whiskey. Um, when we were thinking of like going, and doing this legally, one of the first people that I reached out to was Bill Owens of, ADI,
Hmm.
American Distilling Institute, and Bill. Bill's a super guy, and he's helped a lot of people over the years. But he, as soon as he found out where we were from, Western Pennsylvania, he said, "Jim, you got to do whiskey. I mean,
Hmm.
you are in the birthplace, you are in the home of American whiskey." And so that really dovetailed with kind of my own personal preference for whiskey. And from that point on, we had blinders on to just focus on, you know, Pennsylvania pot distilled
Hmm.
whiskey. That's been our goal from day one.
Yeah, absolutely right, because there is such a great history there. There's no need to try to recreate what people have done in Kentucky or in Tennessee or any other place. So you're basically
Absolutely.
embracing the heritage and the whiskey history in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah, and we just released, you have the bottle of Old Monongahela Foolproof
Mhm.
Rye, and
Yep.
in our release video, there you go.
Yep.
In our release video, we throw up a little factoid that in 1810, or I can't remember exactly, Pennsylvania made 3 million gallons of whiskey, which
Hmm.
was three times what Kentucky made in that
Right.
same year. People, nowadays people think of Kentucky as kind of the birthplace and the home of whiskey, and certainly right now it is the mega producer of whiskey, but
Right.
it wasn't always that way, and Pennsylvania has just an incredible history in the evolution and of American whiskey, and we're right in the cradle. We are in the Monongahela Valley, where Monongahela rye whiskey became famous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you've got, well, before we get into that, tell everybody what the significance is of Monongahela rye and what that means.
Well, we kind of there's really kind of two eras of Monongahela rye.
Hmm.
There is the colonial era, back during the Whiskey Rebellion, and that's kind of the era that we pay homage to.
Hmm.
The second era is the pre-prohibition era of Monongahela rye, Pennsylvania rye, three chamber stills. Um,
Hmm.
but Pennsylvania has always been a rye whiskey state, right?
Hmm.
Um, Rye is a very hardy grain. We like to show people when we do a tour, we have, two large grain bins outside of our distillery, and we get big farm trucks that offload grain, and we have a grain elevator that runs it up to the top of the bin. Well, one day last year when we were loading the bin, we kind of missed the drop into the bin, and we spilled a bunch of rye behind the bin
Hmm.
onto basically river rock. That was all that was there.
Yeah.
Um, 3 months later, we had an estate rye field growing. I mean, rye will grow anywhere. I don't know what it rooted to. I mean, literally, we thought it was just all river rock, but
Yeah.
um, but that just goes to show, why rye was such a popular grain here in Western
Right.
Pennsylvania in 1780, in 1790s. Before there was irrigation, it was a tough place to farm, and so
Hmm.
the farmers here would grow rye, and of course they were Scots Irish, so they knew how to distill,
Hmm.
so they became known for rye whiskey, and you know, Ben Franklin wrote in his diary that when he arrived in Paris on one of his trips, that one of the first questions somebody asked him was, "Did you bring any of that Monongahela rye?" Herman Melville wrote about Monongahela rye in Moby Dick, which
Hmm.
was 1850 published date. So we kind of honor that 18th century colonial
Hmm.
Pennsylvania rye, high rye mash bill, pot distilled, sweet mashed. There are others that are really latching on to more of the pre-prohibition era
Hmm.
when three chamber stills became a thing and it was a much more industrial process.
Hmm.
Both Monongahela rye, just kind of different eras.
Yeah. Yeah. But in the era that you're talking about, the the rye production and the whiskey production from the rye, that was just part of agricultural process. That was part of the economy at that
Oh,
point, right?
absolutely. Yeah. Every farm had a still, or every town had a still that would, move between farms.
Mhm.
And the farmers here, in 1791, when the excise tax on whiskey was passed by Alexander Hamilton, who, by the way, we have hanging upside down in our a portrait of him hanging upside down in our tasting room. They would they weren't distilling rye as a business. They weren't making whiskey as a profit center. they were
Right.
they were literally doing it to preserve the grain, right?
Yeah.
In 1791 in Western Pennsylvania, this was the frontier. This was kind of as far west as civilization had, if you
Yeah.
could call it that, had really made it. There were no roads, there were no banks, there was no currency. Whiskey was a currency. So they would distill their grains, because if
Mhm.
you don't consume your grains as food,
Right.
if you don't, if you can't trade them for other goods and services, the mice will get to it. It will mold. It will go bad. But if you
Mhm.
turn that grain into whiskey, it lasts forever. So
Yeah.
so that they would distill these grains, these excess grains, into whiskey as a way to preserve those grains. And then the byproduct of that was that they had a currency, and they could use that whiskey to trade for other goods and services.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and try some of this old Monongahela foolproof rye whiskey. And I've got a little bit poured here. Do you have any with you?
I do. I have my bottle
Yeah.
right here. There we go.
Awesome.
I'm gonna grab a glass.
All righty. Make sure everybody gets a good look at the bottle. And we'll talk with Jim about the logo and the name here in just a second too.
Okay. So
So,
yeah,
cheer
so
cheers.
the old Mon cheers, Kevin. Old Monongahela foolproof rye. So the name Old Monongahela, right? Monongahela rye has always been used to reference the rye whiskey made here in Western Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
Old Monongahela rye denotes that it was aged and that it, took on that brown hue from being in a barrel.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
that's where Old Monongahela. The foolproof comes from, we have a barrel entry proof of 108 proof.
Right.
So when we blend the barrels for each batch of Old Monongahela, we'll typically have a blended proof of around 111, 112. Proof tends to rise a bit during the aging. So we will basically add a little bit of water to knock that back down to its barrel entry proof.
Right.
So that's what we mean by foolproof. The
Sure.
the mash bill on this is it is 74% rye.
Mhm.
Um, and of that 74%, 13% is actually a malted rye. So it's
Oh, okay.
61% rye, 13% malted rye. We do like wheat. We add wheat to a lot of our mash bills because we like the softness and the approachability that wheat kind of
Hmm.
lends to a whiskey. So we have 13% wheat in here and 13% malted barley.
Yeah. It's interesting that you got the malted rye in there. I like that. There's a nice little citrus lemony note there. There's some spearmint there. Um,
We get a lot of people that pick out that lemony
yeah,
note. Yeah.
yeah. And eh, when I sip it, it's like stepping into a bakery, kind of a
Mhm.
yeasty baked bread thing going on, maybe like toast with some apricot jam, a
There you
little
go.
bit of pepper.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is outstanding.
Thank
Outstanding.
you.
What's
We
what's the age on it?
so this particular batch, this is F24, so it's our
Mhm,
second batch.
mhm.
This was a 9 barrel blend, and the 9 barrels ranged in age from, a couple of them were 3.5, 3 3/4 years old. The majority of those 9 barrels were 4 years old, up to 4.5 years
Okay,
old.
okay. Um, no, this is really, really good.
Thank you.
It's a very unique rye too. Um,
It is, and we get a lot of, people that come into the tasting room, and, they kinda have a preconceived notion that they don't like rye.
right.
They've tried 10 different ryes, and they don't like them, and so they don't think they like rye, and, I asked them, "Well, what have you tried?" And,
Mhm.
invariably, they're all MGP blends, and
Right.
they're
They're all
all 95.5.
95.5 ryes, yes. Yeah.
Right, right, and so, when I explain that to them that, you've really kind of tasted the same juice, it might be finished differently, but, um, you know,
Mhm,
what I love about rye today is that there are so many distillers doing so
mhm,
many really unique things with rye. Rye can be bold and spicy, it can punch you in the face, it can be really, black peppery. I think ours tends to be, like you said, a little bit more on the baking spices, a little bit more
mhm,
on the herbal side.
mhm.
It doesn't drink like, a really, really spice bomb.
Yeah. No, it's not at all, and it doesn't have any uh dill notes like a younger 95.5 rye would have. I mean,
Right,
it's a different experience, and I think you're exactly right that when people say they don't like rye, it's probably because they've only been trying one rye and they just didn't know it. And
right,
not to
right.
knock that
No,
95.5
not
rye.
not
There are
not at
some very
all.
good expressions of it out there,
Oh, heck yeah.
uh, and lots of distilleries are doing some secondary aging or different blending with it, and good stuff. But
Oh, yeah. Yep.
let's try something different too.
Yeah. Right, right, right.
So,
And the thing that we the and this, Kevin, this is ultimately our flagship whiskey, and
mhm,
what we like most about it when we tell people is that the thing that we really like about rye, and our rye and our mash bill, is that it is absolutely not a bourbon.
mhm,
There's no corn in here. I mean, it is, you
right,
know, there's a lot of bourbons out there, and we make a bourbon, we make a good bourbon, but, it's nice to have a product that really differentiates itself from the bourbon world.
yeah. No, I agree completely, and I applaud you on this. I know this is really authentic because there's actually a little bit of char in my glass. So this is
Oh, really?
yeah, I love it. Uh,
Okay, yeah. Yeah, we, obviously we don't chill filter.
yeah,
We do run the barrels through a cheesecloth
sure.
filter when we dump,
Yeah,
but
but a little bit broke through. So
those
when
pesky barrel char specs.
that's good. That just meet kind of connects you to it. To me,
Yep,
I'll kind of like that. Um,
exactly.
so the name Liberty Pole. Why did you choose to name your spirits company Liberty Pole Spirits?
So Liberty poles go back actually to ancient Greek times. They have always been a kind of a symbol of protest.
Hmm.
And, during colonial America, liberty poles were a very common way of, protesting. So before we gained independence, liberty poles were, they dotted the landscape protesting English rule.
Hmm.
Um, Once we gained independence and this excise tax on distilled spirits was passed, liberty poles became the main way to protest that excise tax.
Hmm. Okay.
The other thing we noticed that a lot of words that are typically associated with the Whiskey Rebellion had already been trademarked. So, it's tough to kind of come up with a new brand that
Yeah.
hasn't already been claimed. And we really like the term Liberty Pole. We thought it was easy to remember, easy to tell your friends about, and most importantly, nobody had used it yet in the beverage industry. So it's a really cool, and it allows us to really tell the story
Yeah.
of the Whiskey Rebellion and
Right.
what it was all about.
Right. No, and I like the fact that you are telling that story with your whiskey, and it's a real story, an authentic story. It's not some made up thing you put on the back of your bottle to
Oh no, yeah, yeah,
as that you paid a marketing company to come up with. So,
right, right, right.
so the history of your distillery, then you started in what 2016, I believe you said. Yeah, you just
2016, we
just
op-
turned
we
8
opened the
years. Yep.
doors.
Yep.
Yep, yep, yep. We started life with a 300-gallon batch system,
Hmm.
and we used that for 3 years,
Yep.
and we upgraded in 2019 to a 600-gallon system.
Hmm.
And the still on the left side of that picture was our upgrade in 2019. Now, you had mentioned Chris Koenig.
Yes.
Chris Koenig is the proud owner of our original 300-gallon still
Yeah.
that we called Harold.
Uh-huh.
Chris has kept the name, and he actually added a second still that he called Mod, which I give him
Yes.
credit for that. That's he did a great job in keeping the name and finding a complimentary name for another still. Um,
Yes.
so we worked with a 600-gallon system until we moved to our new place last year,
Mhm.
and we upgraded to 1,000-gallon system. So we have 1,000-gallon cooker, 4 1,000-gallon fermenters. We have a thousand
Okay.
gallon stripping still that we got from Vendome, and then we kept that 600-gallon specific mechanical still, and that's our spirit still. That's our second. That's our
Okay.
second distillation.
Um, so what are the names of the new stills since Harold is out on the West
Well,
Coast now?
so the new still, the 600-gallon still that we replaced Harold with, he's now known as Big Harold because he's double the size.
Okay.
The sti the sti and the 1,000-gallon Vendome, his name is Howard, and so we go back to, honoring, our fathers. So
Mhm.
Harold was my father,
Mhm.
and my wife's father's name was Howard.
Okay.
So, those are two names that you don't see a lot of these days, and
Yeah.
they're classic old names, and the fact that her dad was Howard and my dad was Harold,
Yeah.
it just really made sense to be a good way to honor them. They're both gone and they didn't get to see the distilleries, but
Mhm.
but they're there every day working,
Yeah.
helping us make whiskey.
Yeah. My dad is a Harold also, so
Is he really?
yes. So,
Perfect.
I'll just, ascribe that he's got partial naming rights to Big Harold too, so
There we
uh,
go.
and this is, the new place. It's
Yes, sir.
gorgeous. Really looks nice. Looks great. Um, what all do you have
Great.
going on inside, the, visitor center there or the main building?
So the visitor center right up front is there's really two areas in there. We have the main area we call the meeting house, and the meeting
Mhm.
house, again, it's a colonial term that was used back in the 18th century for a place for people to gather. And
Mhm.
so our meeting house is our cocktail bar, restaurant. We have a kitchen, so we have a really great chef, and we serve small bites and just amazing craft cocktails.
Great.
We also have a separate entrance in that building that goes into our bottle shop, and the bottle shop is where and that's under the porch there on the
Mhm.
right. The bottle shop is where you can walk in, and our spirit shop people there will walk you through a tasting. You can buy bottles and merchandise there.
Okay.
Um, we have an 8,000 square foot production facility that sits right behind the meeting house, and
Mhm.
that's where our stills and fermenter and bottling line and cistern all sit in that area.
Yeah.
And then kind of our pride and joy is the building on the left. It is proudly Pennsylvania's only traditional wooden rick house.
Wow.
We hired Busick Construction, which
Mhm.
they're based in Bardstown.
Yep.
They probably have built 95% or more of the rick houses that dot the landscape of Kentucky, and they were kind enough to take on our small job. I mean,
Yeah.
they were kidding us that this is the smallest 5-story rick house they've ever built. Now they've built smaller rick houses, but they were not the full
Yeah.
5 stories.
Yeah.
Um, our 5-story rick house can only hold 3,600 barrels. To us, that's a lot, but
Right.
when you think about what they're typically building for the big heritage guys,
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't think they start at less than 40,000 barrels.
Yeah.
So,
No, you drive between, Louisville and Bardstown taking the back roads, and they're just everywhere, everywhere.
yeah,
And you'll
yeah,
drive down one week and there's not one there, and you drive down the next week and there's two.
yeah. Well, I mean, that makes sense because it took a crew of 20 guys basically 6 days to construct 5 stories of ricks, in the building.
Mhm.
They have it down to a science. They're very professional. They did an amazing job, and we just love it. We honestly think, Kevin, and my sons kid me for saying this, but we think it's one of the best aging environments in the world,
Mhm.
because it is small. We have a lot of windows. We have a lot of airflow. We're sitting on a
Mhm.
hill. We have 5 floors, so we've got all the different microclimates on floor 1 through
Right.
floor 5. We don't have that big dead middle zone, right? When you have a 50,000 barrel rick house, those inner barrels, they're not getting the oxygen, the airflow, the
Right.
thermal mass of those barrels, is keeping the temperature. They're not fluctuating. They're not
Right.
getting that heat cycle in the middle, as much as you do on those north or southwest facing walls. So
Yeah.
our kind of entire we think our entire rick house is kind of like a honey hole, because every barrel is getting lots of temperature changes.
Mhm.
It's getting lots of oxygen. So
Yeah.
so we're really excited about it. We've only had barrels in there for about a year,
Yeah.
a little over a year at this point, but we're really seeing some amazing things, especially from the fourth and fifth floors.
Yeah.
So
So you're when you're filling it up, and here's a photo that I found on, I think, on your website.
yeah,
When you're filling this up, you're not just, okay, well, we'll fill in the first floor, then we'll fill in the second floor. You're filling in uh all levels and then just kind of working it uh down to up, I guess, as you
yeah,
go
we
across.
had we had to follow a procedure that Busick gave us. You can't put all the weight on the fifth floor on day one. So we kind of had to slowly build from the ground floor up to the upper floors.
Yeah.
Um, we're also waiting on kind of a specific tool called a ricker that will allow us to lift. If you notice that picture you had, we
Mhm.
had all the barrels in the lower rick.
Right.
We don't have a good solution yet for getting barrels onto the middle and the upper ricks. Uh, so there's a specialized piece of equipment that's explosion proof that, it's basically like an engine lift, but it's
Hmm.
designed for rick houses. Luckily, we have enough capacity on that ground rick on each, on the higher floors,
Yeah.
that we don't have to really start worrying about filling those middle and top racks for about another year. And that's about what the wait time is to get one of these rickers.
Okay. Well, good. I mean, so from a production standpoint, uh, how much product, how many barrels can you fill in a week, and how many
Yeah.
are you right now?
So we do, depending on yield, we do usually between 12 and 14 barrels a week.
Okay.
And we have a 3,600 barrel capacity in the rick house. Right now we have a little over 1,100 barrels in the rick house. So, the math will tell you that we've got a few years left in this rick house before
Right.
we're filling it, because we're also pulling, right? We're putting 12 barrels away a week, but we might be pulling three or four, for blending.
Yeah.
So, so we've got some runway before we run out of space there.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. Well, congratulations. It looks like a beautiful facility. Charted out the map between my house and your distillery. It's about 5.5 hours, so I'll
There you
plan
go.
a trip up there sometime soon. Would love to see
I
it in
would love
person.
it. Would love it.
Yeah, let's talk a little music for a second.
Yeah.
What what did you listen to when you were growing up?
Yeah. And my wife gives me, a lot of grief that I don't open myself up to, newer music. I'm a child of the 60s and mostly the 70s.
Hmm.
So, my playlists are, the Eagles and Bruce
Hmm.
Springsteen and Jackson Brown and, kind of that 70s rock, soft
Hmm.
rock. I wasn't surprisingly my probably my favorite band of all time is, it doesn't really fit in with the Jackson Brown, Bruce Springsteen genre, but it's Jethro Tull.
Okay.
I was a
Wow.
huge Tull fan growing up.
Very cool. What drew you to
Yeah.
Jethro Tull? Because that's
I think the fact that they were the first concert that I ever attended.
okay. Well, that'll do it.
They, yeah, so
Yeah.
just really great memories of, being 16 years old and, kind of going with friends to a Jethro Tull concert, and it was yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
life changing.
Where did you see them?
We saw them at the old, it was called the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. It's
Okay.
no longer there, but it was a retractable dome, and the dome would open in warm weather. Was where the Pittsburgh Penguins played hockey.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh, I don't think I ever went to the Civic Arena, but I've been to I guess is it PNC Arena
PNC
now?
Park, the
Yeah.
baseball stadium.
I've been to
Yeah,
I've been to the baseball stadium, but what's the name of the arena there now? I've seen a couple of shows there.
it's PPG Place
Yeah,
now.
that's it. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a nice facility. Well, all the big facilities in Pittsburgh are really nice. They've done a great job
yeah,
with it, and
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, are you into? I mean, Jethro Tull's a little bit of a prog rock kind of band. Are you into other bands kind of in that vein, like a Yes or a King Crimson, or is it just no? Jethro Tull was kind of it because I saw him live, and then I'm going
Yeah,
back to my Eagles and Springsteen.
that's pretty much
Yeah,
you nailed it. Yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty much it.
So, do you remember the first album that you bought?
I think the first album I ever bought was Fleetwood Mac Rumors.
Okay.
I remember playing the album in my bedroom on a my little record player.
Yeah. Did you ever listen to any early Fleetwood Mac? Like when Peter Green was still involved, or you just kind of
No,
jumped in with rumors?
Rumors was about the start of my Fleetwood Mac. Uh,
Well, that's a good place to start. Obviously, a huge album for the band. Did you ever see them live?
Never saw those guys live.
Yeah.
I probably the performer that I've seen the most live is Springsteen,
Yeah.
and I just missed him. He was here 2 nights ago here in Pittsburgh. He did a two night show
Yeah.
here in Pittsburgh, and he's still going strong.
Yeah. What about the Eagles? Have you seen them much, or
Yep, yep.
yeah?
I've seen the Eagles. Yep, saw them on their oh, what did they call that tour when
Which one
when
of
they
their final tours have you seen them on?
Yeah,
I think there've been about 5
exactly.
or 6 now.
Yeah.
Well, there was the Hell Freezes Over tour. I think that was the
Oh,
first that
that's
was
the tour that
the first reunion tour. And then I think anytime one of them was running a little short on cash, he said, "Okay, time to tour again.
yeah,
Let's."
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
and
yeah,
famously fighting on stage. I mean, just physically threatening one another in between songs, but yeah, somehow they made it work. Yeah, well,
yeah.
we've got some close friends here that have seen the Eagles, Lord, I don't know, a dozen different times, and that's their favorite band. So,
Kevin, when I knew I was coming to talk to you, and you know, I love music, but I'm not, kind of. I was worried about talking to you about specific, kind of musical milestones that I had. But
yeah,
one thing that I did think about, and I've actually had this conversation with other people,
hmm
is that I think distilling um, and kind of music have this one common thread in that you know it's very hard to kind of hit it to that next level, and specifically, I don't know if you're like follow kind of bands that never really made it out of their home markets.
hmm
We've got some amazing bands that I don't know if you've ever heard of the Clarks, or if you've ever heard of Rusted Root, or you probably have heard of Donnie Iris.
hmm
But I mean, the kind of it's a razor thin margin between
right,
these bands that make it and the ones that never get beyond kind of that local market. And
yeah,
I think distilling is kind of similar to that, in that you've got distillers that are producing great whiskey. I not to pat ourselves on the back, but I think
hmm
we fall into that. I think we're making really good whiskey, but
yeah,
people in Cedar Ridge, Iowa, have never heard of us. Boston. It really takes a break, or it really takes somebody championing your whiskey
right,
to really kind of open you up to new markets. And that was the one thing that, as I thought about music and whiskey, that was the common thread that really intrigued me. And
yeah.
I do think that there's a lot of similarities there.
No, I think you're spot on with that. And as you were listing off those musicians in your area, I'm taking notes, so I'll find them.
And let me
But
add another one to it. A band
uh-huh,
called The Gathering Field. Lost in America was a huge hit.
yeah,
But yeah, they never really made it much beyond Western Pennsylvania, and they're
yeah,
they're fantastic.
yeah, and a lot of the groups and musicians that we have on here are they fall into that category to some degree,
Yeah,
and and I've had bands on here a lot from this area, and then, uh, had just did a couple of shows with the guys from a band called Mojo Thunder.
yeah, let's
Um,
listen to it. Yeah,
yeah, and they're great. They're absolutely great. It's just when does that break happen that kind of allows you to go to that next level? And that's something that I think about every time I talk with any of the bands that I'm dealing with.
my nephew is in a band, local band, and
Mhm,
they're pretty good. They're a country band, and they had an opportunity to go to Nashville
mhm,
and perform for a record label, in hopes of getting signed, and they went down and they killed it.
mhm,
But that day, when the producer kind of called them in and said, "Guys, you were awesome. We can only sign one band." And today, unfortunately, the one of the other auditions was a guy named Mark Cohen who did Walking in Memphis.
mhm.
Like, just
Right,
any other day when Mark Cohen's not there performing Walking in Memphis, these guys might have gotten signed and
right. Right. Who knows? Who knows?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But at some level, it's it's a passion project either way, you know?
yes,
If you're a distiller and, you're just you're consumed by the craft that you have and the spirit that you're making, and in your case, perpetuating the history of Pennsylvania whiskey, specifically Western Pennsylvania rye whiskey. Um,
right.
that that's huge, and a lot. Same thing with a lot of these bands. They love their music. They love playing together. They love reaching out to audiences, and hopefully the break comes. But if it doesn't,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
still
They're still enjoying
there's
life.
still
They're still
that.
making
Yes.
music, and yep, yep, yep,
Yep.
yep.
Um, But no, I think you're right on with that analogy, and quite frankly, that's a lot of what I try to do here is support and encourage and promote the best I can, uh,
Oh, heck yeah.
whether it's a musician or whether it's a distillery such as yourself. And sometimes you just need to have somebody tell you, "Hey, this is really good,"
Yeah,
whether it's a new
yeah.
song or whether it's a new spirit, or you're killing it. You're on the right track. You're doing the things you need to do, and that definitely is the case for what you're doing with Liberty Pole as well. So, uh,
Well,
d-
thank you.
do you play any music?
I
Play
do
any
not.
instruments? Yeah.
No, I'm
Play the radio?
completely
Like yeah,
yeah, I play the
yeah,
radio. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, it is, do you use music at all as when you're in the distillery, just to kind of either
Oh,
as a, I something to inspire or something to motivate?
yeah. We always have, music on, and, kind of our current playlist leans towards, kind of country
Yeah,
these days. We play a lot of Chris Stapleton.
yeah,
Um, there it just seems to really mesh well with, with whiskey. There's a lot of whiskey themed songs
mhm,
in the country genre.
yeah, and, yeah, and again, part of what we wanna do is, listen to music while we're enjoying whiskey, and that's kind of what got this started. Was I would sit around with friends here at the house, and we would be drinking different whiskeys from all over the country or all over the world, and we'd be listening to music from all over the country or all over the world and all different genres, and just talking about both. And I said, well,
Yeah.
let's see if anybody
Yeah.
else is interested in this.
Oh, heck yeah.
So here we
I
are.
I I I listened to your episode with Chris Koenig, and it was really interesting to hear you guys talk about that,
Mhm.
California music
Yeah.
of Chris's era.
Yeah, 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 that was a lot of fun. We're gonna do another one of those before too long, and kind of
Yeah,
carry that forward. But Chris is doing great things out there, and
absolutely.
again, embracing the area and the
Mm.
grains of that area and the heritage of that
Nice.
area.
Yeah,
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 that's
yeah,
really good stuff. Really good stuff.
yeah.
So let's switch gears over to this peated bourbon for just a second.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
this is fantastic. Um, why did you choose to do a peated bourbon?
Yeah, so, when we set up our business plan, you know, th we realized that we were never going to be able to, compete with Jim Beam and Maker's Mark.
Mhm.
They say in the industry you can't out Jim Beam. So,
Right.
so right off the bat, we wanted to be unique. We wanted to produce a unique spirit. We wanted to use heritage grains, and we wanted to do things that kind of nobody else was doing. And
Hmm.
it just so happens that the peated bourbon goes back to my home distilling days. My wife is a huge um, she's a huge peat head.
Really?
She loves Isla scotches. If you I don't know if you can see the glass that I'm drinking of, Boggers United. So we have
Yeah.
a group here in Pittsburgh that call themselves Boggers because they are big peat lovers. So and my wife is kind of an honorary member of that group because everybody knows how much she loves peat. But when I was home distilling, I was making, you know, I was making bourbon and rye.
Mm.
And one day she said, well, why don't you make something that I really like?
Hmm.
And so I thought, okay, I'll see if I can get some peated malt.
Mm.
And as a hobby distiller, you don't have access to, a lot of grains. You have to go to brewery supply stores, and as you can guess, peated malt is not a big
Right.
ingredient in beer. A little goes a very long way. So you can get it, but it's typically sold in very small quantities and at a high price. And so I
Right.
kind of did the math at how many bags of this quarter pound peated malt I would have to buy to make a 10-gallon mash. And I said, well, maybe I'll just get enough to add to a bourbon mash to
Hmm.
give it a little peat influence, but not break the bank. And so I started making peated bourbon on the home still. And it was really the reason why we decided to open a distillery. It was just so unique, and it really hit home, and people that I sampled it out to loved it. And,
Hmm.
and it just fit our kind of MO of producing something that, is unique and different, and that something that the heritage guys, just aren't going to do.
Right.
Although Buffalo Trace recently released a peated bourbon. So the big
Sure.
guys are doing it, but that's one of those experimental batches that 99.9% of the whiskey community will never get a chance to try because it's allocated and you
Sure.
can't find it. But yeah,
That's what they,
so
that's what
just
they do
just
really
trying.
well. They do that
Yeah,
really well.
exactly.
So, yeah, you definitely get kind of the bonfire on the nose and maybe a little toffee. Um,
The
hmm,
the thing that when I do a
interesting.
tasting of this, I kind of I kind of let people know that I do think that um, the peat comes through a little bit more on the palate than you might expect based on the nose.
Hmm.
There are the phenols on the nose, but I think it hits your palate a little bit more peaty than you might expect. But certainly not to the level of an Ardbeg or a
Right.
Lafroig,
Oh, right.
a single malt, right?
Yeah.
It's subdued because it's only about 30% of the mash bill
Right.
is the peated malt.
No, and that first sip, it certainly captures your palate, but
Absolutely.
as you take subsequent sips, there are some interesting notes that come out. Mm. Get a little cornbread. Um,
A
maybe
little toasted marshmallow on that.
yeah. Get some walnut in there too, I think. Um, yeah, I like that a lot. Little tobacco-y, but not
Yeah, yeah,
not it's a lot of people when they see peated, they're like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. And but you just again, it's like rye. Oh, I don't like rye. Oh, I don't like
yeah,
peat. Well, okay,
yeah, yeah.
let's talk about
Try this one.
what you've tried in the past.
Right.
and
right.
let's stay open to new things and new ideas, whether it's whiskey or music or whatever it may be.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that the thing about the peated bourbon, and this is something I still kind of struggle to get my arms around. But when we do we do a tasting, and you'll get a group of people, and invariably there's one or two people that just aren't whiskey people at all, and they'll
mhm,
participate just to be part of the group.
right,
And at the end, like the novice whiskey people, this ends up being their favorite pour, um, more often than not.
yeah,
So there's something about this that
yeah,
that appeals to people that don't have any preconceived
right,
biases. They don't have any kind of whiskey favorites.
right. And I think something like this is a great gateway whiskey, either people that are Scotch drinkers to get them into uh, bourbon or rye or American whiskey,
Yep, yep,
or people that
or
are
vice versa.
bourbon drinkers, getting them into something that's more of the Scotch variety.
Right,
So
right.
yeah, um, no, I like this a lot. I enjoy this. This is very nice, and I'm not typically a big peat fan. I don't like the wee beastie and everything. That's just a little too much for me and my palate. I can appreciate
Oh,
it and respect it, but
100%. Yeah.
not it's not necessarily for me. But I like this. I like like what you're doing with this. Now, um, do you buy the grain already peated, or do you do that
We,
yourself?
no, we do. We buy heavily peated malt
Mhm.
from a Scottish malt company,
Oh,
so we
okay.
get it imported. It's a Highlands peat.
Hmm.
So it's not quite the Isla, all the saltiness of the Isla, the
Mhm.
islands, but it's more of a earthy peat from the Highlands.
Mhm. No, I like that. Very good. Very good. Now, what else? What other spirits do you have on your lineup right now at the distillery, or available online?
So online to, shipping outside of Pennsylvania, we kind of focused on our rye portfolio.
Hmm.
So, through Big Thirst shipping to 38 states, we have our Old Monongahela
Hmm.
foolproof. We have our straight rye, which is basically the Old Monongahela, but at proof down to 92.
Hmm.
And we have our peated rye, which you said you had a chance to try,
Hmm.
um, probably at oh,
Watch Hill.
Watch Hill proper, yeah.
Hmm.
And and we also have our bourbon cream, which that's been a staple for us from the beginning. We make a really nice bourbon cream. Um,
Okay.
those are the products that we have available. We're going to be putting up a spiced rye whiskey that we do for the holidays
Hmm.
in October, available on Big Thirst too.
Okay.
We do, you know, back at the distillery and in Pennsylvania here, we ship our the rest of our portfolio, the peated bourbon. We do wheated bourbon. We have a corn whiskey.
Hmm.
We have a gin that the gin is the only thing that we bottle that we didn't distill. We actually sourced the gin
Hmm.
and rested in bourbon barrels for about a year.
Okay.
So that's primarily for our cocktail program, but we do sell bottles of it for people that want to take it home.
Do you
And,
rest
and
it in the peated bourbon barrels?
no, no, just the regular bourbon
Uh,
barrels.
I think that'd be
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it would be.
um,
We've been experimenting, Kevin, with, a lot of finishing projects.
hmm.
We've done a couple Amberana, finished releases that have been really popular. We've done an Oloroso sherry
Hmm.
finished, peated bourbon and orange curacao barrel finished peated rye.
Hmm.
Um, we have some Martinique rum barrels finishing rye.
Oh,
So
interesting.
so we're kind of having fun with that finishing
Yeah.
project. We're excited about. I don't know if you've heard of Rosen Rye, but
Oh,
Rosen
yeah.
Rye is it's a kind of. Street Pro varietal of rye that basically became extinct,
Mhm.
except for a seed bank, and a couple of places have kind of regrown that
Yeah.
seed through, or that grain through successive seasons of planting and saving the seeds and growing it.
Mhm.
We were fortunate enough to be kind of the second distillery in Pennsylvania to get our hands on rosin, and we have a single barrel of rosin rye that'll turn 4 years old next month that we're
Oh, wow.
looking forward to releasing here before the holidays.
Yeah.
So we do
I've
a
had
lot of single barrels,
yeah,
a lot of finishing barrels these days.
yeah. I've had some Rosen rye from Stolen Wolf,
Yes.
and, Eric, and, he's been on a couple of different shows, with me before, and he's great.
Yep.
Um,
Eric's great. His dad, Jim,
yep.
they're doing great things. Yeah, they were the first. I said we were the second distillery in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, and it was only fitting that Dick Stoll
Sure.
was the first, and
Yeah,
Eric to distill that grain.
yeah. Uh, so your, Rosen rye, you say, is already 4 years old? So
Yes. Yeah.
okay,
Well, it'll turn 4 years old in October,
okay. And do you
and
plan
we're
to
gonna.
release it at that point, or you is that the
y-
where you're
I
going with it?
think we will. I think we will. It's amazing.
Yep.
It's the latest right now at 3 years and 10 months.
Yeah.
We'll let it get to 4 years old. I don't think we will do a bottled and bond version of it because we like it at barrel proof a little bit
Mhm.
more than at 100 proof.
Yeah,
So, that's always a decision to make. But, we let the whiskey kind of tell us where it should where it
yeah.
should go. And right now we think, it's going to go as a cask strength single
Mhm.
barrel.
Now, will that be available for shipping, or do I need to plan my trip to Pennsylvania in, October?
You know what, Kevin? That may be a lottery. We may have to kind of do a lottery just to keep the
Yeah,
lines down, because I think there's going to be a lot of interest in
I think you're right.
to my knowledge, and I may be wrong. I think it may be the first 4-year-old Rosen to hit the market. We sat on that
Yeah.
when it was 2 years old. It was really good, but we
Mhm.
decided to push it to 4 years.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of demand for that. It because everything that's come out that's got rose and rye on in the name or in the mash bill, it gains a lot of attention. But
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. That's good for you guys, good for Stolen Wolf, and good for,
Well,
Pennsylvania distillers in general.
Pennsylvania, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's really good for Pennsylvania.
yeah. So, what else is, in the works for the future? What are your other future plans?
We are just we're going to continue to be patient. Um, we may be the dumbest people to ever open up a distillery, in the sense that, we have never signed with a distributor. We've never tried to distribute outside of our home market. We've kind of been very patient with our aging program,
Mhm,
and we've only been able to produce enough whiskey to kind of meet the demand in Western Pennsylvania. So we're excited. Basically 3 years from now, we've been producing. When we moved into our new place, we kind of 3x'd our production from our
mhm,
old place, and so those barrels now are a year old.
mhm.
And in 3 more years we'll have a lot more 4+ year old whiskey that will be available, mature, and at that point, that would be the time where I think we would be interested in kind of dipping our toes into some new markets,
Yeah,
to expand into some neighboring states. But right now we're keeping it close to the vest, and we're focusing on our backyard.
yeah,
And yeah, we're just continuing to make more pot distilled whiskey. We're big pot still evangelists.
yeah,
When we moved into the new place, and we reached out to equipment vendors to give us quotes on, kind of how we could configure our new space. A lot of them tried to talk us into a column still, and you
Hmm.
know, um, yeah, we just it would have just fundamentally changed the profile of our
Right.
whiskey, and we just didn't want to do it. So, pot stills will never be able to be a national brand. We'll never be able to make enough whiskey to kind of send it out to all 50 states. So we're going to be a hyper regional brand, but
Hmm.
we believe in pot still, and we're excited about just continuing to grow slowly over the years.
Yeah. Well, and when you're talking about pot still, one of the things that you get a lot of with pot stills is just the oiliness of it, and you can't see it on the screen, but
Oh,
it certainly creates some very thick, beautiful legs.
oh, it's
So,
it's oily, it's chewy, it's
yeah,
viscous. Yeah, it's just a big whiskey, and that's kind of what we really love about it.
boy, as I've let this old Monongahela sit here for a while in this glass, man, that nose just keeps opening up. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
that's so good.
yeah.
Oh, wow, fantastic. Well, uh, thank you so much, Jim, for being on. Really, really appreciate it. I've loved talking with you about your whiskeys, about your plans, and about music. Before we start signing off here, tell everybody where they can find you and Liberty Bowl on social media.
Yeah, so we're on all the typical socials. Our website is libertypulsespirits.com. um, Facebook and Instagram, we're Liberty Pole Spirits, and Twitter or X, I think we're Lib Pole Spirits. But you can find us on all the socials. We have a pretty active social media.
Hmm.
We try not to overwhelm our followers with multiple posts a day, but when we have something we think is worthy of posting, we do it.
Hmm.
And we have a guy that helps us. We If nothing else, Kevin, you know, check out the drone video of our new facility. We had a guy do a drone fly through of the facility, and he just did an amazing job. He had his 3D virtual goggles on, and he had to do this in one take. But it's really a cool kind of experience in flying through the tasting room and the bottle shop and the production floor and the barrel house. Uh,
Okay, yeah, I've looked at your website, but I did not see the video. I'll go back and find that. That sounds
oh,
fun.
go find it.
Yeah,
It's pretty. It's on there somewhere.
yeah. Well, that's great. Be sure to follow Liberty Pole wherever you viewers may be on social media yourself. You know where you can find us on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms. We also have a Facebook page where we post all of our shows, including this one. We have a Facebook group where we will post what we're drinking, what we're listening to while we're drinking it. I think I posted something the other night. I was doing some work on the grill and sipping on some old Monongahela, and I don't remember what I was listening to that night, but that's the kind of thing we want to hear from folks, and just really enjoy what you're doing here, Jim. So congratulations on 8 years and many, many more with your family producing fantastic spirits in Western Pennsylvania.
Kevin, thank you for having me on. I was an honor. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank you everyone for watching. And on behalf of Jim and myself, uh, till next time, cheers, love, and free bird.
Cheers.
Night.